Good morning. Today is October 28th, 2021. The time is approximately 10:05 a.m. and this is the duly called meeting of the Texas Low-Level Radioactive Waste Disposal Compact Commission. I am Brandon Hurley. I'm the chair of the commission. With us today on the dais, we have Commissioner Mundy. We are very happy to see Lisa back, Commissioner Morris, our executive director, Stephen Rains, Commissioner Saudick, the judge, and Vice Chairman Salzman. Also online, we have Commissioner Bradford, so we have a full quorum and we can proceed with our business. Quickly, I will look on the Zoom to see if we have any of our elected officials with us today or anyone from elected officials' offices. We always appreciate our friends from TCEQ joining us. I also understand today that we have several people from the Sunset Commission here in person. We have Robert Ramigo, is that correct? Romig. We are very happy to have him, and we look forward to working with him as we move forward with the sunset process. They have already done a substantial amount of work, and we appreciate all that they are doing for us. We would also like to make sure that we welcome everyone else who's joining us. Diane Fulmer, who is our accountant, is with us today. We appreciate her. We, of course, have Megan with us here in person too. We appreciate her being with us. And then with that, I think we have determined we have a quorum.
The low-level forum.
Oh, and that guy named Shrum is here too. We appreciate him coming in. He didn't come to just see us, though. We understand he went to San Antonio last night to check out our next location for the low-level forum. So we will talk more about that as we get to that point. Anyone here online today, a member of the press, so we can identify you? And again, for everyone online, we are operating today in a hybrid format, but if you will use the raise your hand function that is down at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom screen, that would let us know that you want to speak or be recognized. So that's the way we hope to keep things orderly today for all of you online.
I might remind everybody they need to turn on the mics and speak in the mics because
Also, commissioners, today, make sure you turn on your mics and make sure you identify yourself before you speak. We'll see how the cameras work today with the Zoom, but we want to make sure everyone knows who is speaking. If there's any problems with that, again, in the audience who is online, please raise your hand and we will try to address our technical issues as quickly as possible. With that, we can move on to item 4 on our agenda, which is a public comment period. So again, as I just described, if anyone has a public comment they would like to make to the commission of a general nature, please let us know by raising your hand on the Zoom and we will recognize you. Karen Haddon has her hand raised. Karen, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Well, good morning, and I'd like to start with a thank you. I really appreciate the fact that you're doing this meeting in a hybrid fashion. It's greatly appreciated. We're trying to be extra cautious about COVID right now at our house. We've got an elderly mother coming in very soon, and we're taking extra precautions, and it's just really appreciated. We're limiting going to meetings and exposures that we don't have to have. So thank you very much. And one point or question I'd like to raise is in the contingency plan that you're working on, I'm wondering in what ways will it be addressed that the high-level radioactive waste facility has been licensed by the NRC, despite the major opposition from the state of Texas at all levels, and that so how will that work in? Because it seems like having that facility there could impact the low-level waste operations. And secondly, I'm just looking forward to hearing about the sunset plans and so forth, and I'm sure we will. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. We appreciate your comments. We will get reports today on both the sunset process and we will allow Commissioner Mundy, who chairs our contingency plan, to provide a report as well. And I'm sure he will try to address that question when it comes to that portion of the agenda. I've already made a mistake today. I failed to recognize our Attorney General Representative, Melissa Juarez, who is with us online. Thank you very much for being with us, Melissa. She's also informed me that to the extent possible, when you're speaking, we need the person's face to be on the screen. So we will make sure that if anyone for some reason is hearing us and can't see us, if you will please let us know so we can make sure that we are complying with that rule. Any other public comments before we move on to item 5 in our agenda? Seeing no hands raised, we can move on to item 5, which is the consideration and possible action on applications for the importation of low-level radioactive waste. The first of these is item 5A, which is the import application of Qualtech Associates. And with that, we will turn it over to the chairman of our technical committee and vice chairman, John Salzman.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and fellow commissioners. This is Commissioner Salzman speaking for the record. The technical committee has received and reviewed an import application from Qualtech Associates LLC. It was received September 22nd, 2021, and it's number 1-0320-00. In this case, Qualtech has indicated they are a generator requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the Act. They have specifically requested authorization for Class C stable sealed sources, and that waste stream was approved by TCEQ in letter correspondence dated October 14, 2021. And they have requested a volume of 18 cubic feet and a total radioactivity of 15 curies. In this case, they indicated the waste would originate from SE, which I believe they've in further correspondence indicated was the Southeast Compact. And so I want to take a moment to sort of explain the comments that I put in the technical review. It was unclear to the commission, or at least to me, how Qualtech was a generator of, in this case, these sealed sources. Through Stephen, we had some additional inquiries of them for information, which was quite helpful. What Qualtech has indicated is that the sources that they intend to dispose of under this import agreement, one of those they received in 2010 and another one they received in 2012. And both sources have been used by Qualtech to provide training in the state of Georgia. So that's sort of the tie back to the Southeast Compact. I think in some respects that's probably not relevant because in fact the sources are owned and possessed by Qualtech. And so at least in this commission's way of viewing that, where those sources are actually used is probably not critical to us making our decision. The important thing is that they were used and that they are in fact in possession and owned by Qualtech. And so Qualtech has indicated that they no longer have a use for these sources. And so they've decided to dispose of those sources, which obviously every generator has that right once they possess radioactive materials to make the decision that the sources are no longer of use. And this would be, similar to any generator who has materials. At some point, they make a business decision to declare it waste and to dispose of it. And that seems reasonable and I would say typical to this commission. Further, the Southeast Compact does not require export authorization as a point of fact, but again, I don't think that's really relevant to our decision here. Qualtech has asked that this be considered as part of a small quantity generator set aside, and based on the volume and curies that makes sense to this commission. And they've requested a 1-year agreement with a termination date of August 31, 2022. Based on the information that Qualtech's provided, the technical committee recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Before we move on to questions, I think we may have a small technical issue. Ms. Juarez thinks that we all need to be on camera. So I think what that means is we're all going to have to sign in and use our camera so that when we speak, we do appear, our faces appear. I know there's the wide shot, but for some reason it's not coming up.
We don't have to show, the wide shot doesn't.
And
So,
Mr. Chair, if I may add,
yes,
yes, so in the video conference, it's necessary that whenever a board member is speaking, that we can see his or her face. I can see, and I'm appearing remotely, I can see the dais. Unfortunately, it does not zoom close enough so we can see individual board members speaking. So whenever a board member is speaking, if they can put on their camera, that's what would be helpful.
okay. Then I think what we need to do is to get everybody set up. We probably need to go ahead and take a quick break so we can deal with the technical issues and make sure everyone can get on. So the time is 10:16. Let's take a 5-minute break so we can work out our technical issues, and then we will come right back. So we will be back by about 10:21. And we will hopefully resolve this very quickly. Thank you.
For camera. And then when Dick speaks, I'll put the camera, I'll turn my laptop to him.
Thank you all for your patience. I think we have it worked out. What we will do to ensure that everyone's face is visible is we will use the gallery view. On anyone watching via Zoom, please use a gallery view where the multiple screens pop up. We will then announce ourselves as we speak, and you will be able to see the face, and you'll, by announcement, be able to know who is speaking. And that way we can make sure that we are complying with all of the requirements. So again, commissioners, if when you are speaking, if you would please announce yourself. Do you think that's acceptable? Okay, so back to where we were. Someone has their,
Judge, that's you. That's one of your audios is on.
so we will now go back to where we were when we left off. I believe Chairman Salzman had finished his recitation and he was about to open it up for questions on item 5A, which is the import application of Qualtech. Are there any questions? In a quick recap, this was the petition that was before us last meeting that we tabled. Is that correct?
Yes, but it has been amended.
And it's been amended. But your point earlier was that there was some question about whether or not Qualtech was the owner of the waste or was acting as potentially a broker.
This is Commissioner Salzman. Yes, the question was they were indicating they were the generator and they're typically a broker. So we requested additional information, and the information they provided, I think, is representative of the fact that they are a broker in this case.
Okay. Any other questions? This is Brandon Hurley. Any other questions for the technical committee?
Yes, this is Commissioner Edwards. Oh, sorry. And can you still hear me?
Yes.
All right. Does any information need to go back to TCEQ, since presumably they had the same information indicating that they were the generator rather than the broker?
We could absolutely provide that information to TCEQ. Qualtech is required by TCEQ rules to fill out a form. Again, this is Commissioner Salzman speaking. I believe it's TCEQ form 20225 or something like that, that requires them to provide information to TCEQ to indicate whether they are a broker or a generator and to substantiate that information. So I'm happy that our commission can provide that information, but I think theoretically that they'll have to submit it anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Edwards, this is Stephen Rains, Executive Director. Because they'd already received certification from TCQ for their application before the additional information was provided, we can supplement that TCQ at their request if they needed any additional information, but they've already approved them for certification.
Again, Brandon Hurley, any other questions for the technical committee? Seeing none, I think we can move on to a motion.
This is Commissioner Salzman. I make a motion that we approve the import application from Qualtech Associates LLC, number 1-0320-00. The waste form is stable. The waste class is Class C. The description is sealed sources. The volume is 18 cubic feet. The total radioactivity is 15 curies. And the agreement would terminate August 31, 2022, and we will consider this under a small quantity generator set aside.
There is a motion. Is there a second? Any further discussion about the import application of Qualtech represented in item 5A on our agenda? Any public comment about the import application of Qualtech? And again, please use the raise your hand function if you're online. Hearing none, I think we can move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the import application of Qualtech represented in item 5A on our agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. With that, we can move on to item 5B, which is, which is the import application of Unitech Services Group. And we will once again turn it back over to Vice Chairman Salzman.
This is Commissioner Salzman. The technical committee has received and reviewed an import application from Unitech Services Group, Inc. It was received August 26, 2021, and it's number 1-0322-00. In this case, Unitech is a broker who is a licensed waste processor requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the Act. They have specifically requested authorization for Class A unstable DAW, metals, flowable material, resin, asbestos, and depleted uranium. And those waste streams were approved for disposal at the site via letter correspondence from TCEQ dated October 14, 2021. They've requested authorization for 650 cubic feet and 10 curies. They have indicated that the waste will originate from all states except Alaska, Hawaii, and Vermont. And so I would first note that any waste from the Southwestern Rocky Mountain or Northwest compacts will generally require export authorization. I would also note that in their list of exclusions, they did not exclude Texas. And so this commission has no authority to regulate the waste that's already within the state of Texas, if you will. We don't grant an import application for that waste. And I would also note that to date, the applicant has not provided export authorizations or generator authorizations. They have requested a one-year agreement that would terminate August 31, 2022. The technical committee recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
John, this is Brandon Hurley. John, what is flowable material?
Probably things like dirt or perhaps paper, plastic, trash.
But not a liquid. Not a liquid?
Not a liquid.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Salzman. The site has specific waste acceptance criteria with regard to liquids, and it's basically you can't have liquids in the waste except at a very, very small percentage.
And the term flowable just made me think that it might be referring to liquids, but that helps me. Again, Brandon Hurley, any other questions for the technical committee? Hearing none, we can move on to a motion.
This is Commissioner Salzman. I make a motion that we approve the import application from Unitech Services Group, Inc., number 1-0322-00. The waste class is Class A. The waste form is unstable. The waste stream is DAW, metals, flowable material, resin, asbestos, and depleted uranium. The volume is 650 cubic feet. The total radioactivity is 10 curies. Any waste that would originate from the southwestern, Rocky Mountain, or Northwest compacts will generally require an export authorization. And so the applicant has not submitted those, and we would give them the ability to submit that information as well as generator authorizations in up to 5 submittals to the commission administration. The waste will originate from all states except Alaska, Hawaii, Vermont, and Texas. And the agreement would terminate August 31, 2022.
Brandon Hurley, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Richard Goldberg, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion about item 5B, the import application of Unitech Services Group? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the import application of Unitech Services Group? Please indicate so by using the raise your hand function. Seeing none, we will move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the import application of Unitech Services represented by item 5B in our agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion passes. We can now move on to item 5C, which is the import application of Phylotechnics. And we will turn it back over to the Vice Chairman Salzman.
This is Commissioner Salzman. The technical committee has received and reviewed an import application from Phylotechnics Limited. It was received September 16, 2021, and it's number 1-0323-00. In this case, Phylotechnics is a broker who's a licensed waste processor and collector requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the Act. They specifically requested authorization for Class A, Class B, and Class C unstable domestic sealed sources, special form material, decommissioning sources, dry active waste, instruments and articles, debris, and other discarded radioactive material that is no longer used or wanted. Those waste streams were approved by TCEQ and letter correspondence dated October 14, 2021. They've requested authorization for 500 cubic feet and 10 curies. They've indicated the waste will originate from all U.S. states and territories except Texas and Vermont. And I would note that any waste from Northwest, Southwestern, or Rocky Mountain compacts will generally require export authorization. And to date, those export authorizations and generator authorizations have not been submitted. They've indicated that they like the waste be disposed of under a small quantity generator set aside, and based on the volume, curies, and generator types, the commission concurs so long as the utility waste does not come from a nuclear utility. And obviously our administrative staff will look at that when they actually submit the generator authorizations. In addition, they've requested a 1-year agreement with a termination date of August 31, 2022. Technical committee recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the technical committee? Commissioner Mundy.
I don't know if Earl Fordham's on the line, but I remember last year we had a question about something coming out of the Northwest, and Mr. Fordham was commenting about they don't require export authorizations per se, but had a general preference not to do it. And I don't know if he's online and has any thoughts on this matter at all.
This is Brandon Hurley. I do not see Earl
Okay,
in the audience. So,
that's my only question.
and John probably understands this better, but my understanding is that They do not require the export authorizations, but they like to basically receive information about it. And we've had, I guess you'd call it a gentleman's agreement with them to give them that information when waste comes out of their compact.
This is Commissioner Salzman. I think Commissioner Hurley has characterized that fairly, which is why I use the term generally as opposed to explicitly.
Yep.
For the Southwestern Compact and the Rocky Mountain Compact, it's explicit. They have language in their rules in place to require export authorization.
Brandon Hurley again. Any other questions for the technical committee? Seeing none, I think we can move on to a motion.
This is Commissioner Salzman. I make a motion to approve the import application for Philotechnics Limited, number 1-0323-00. The waste is Class A, Class B, and Class C. The waste class. The waste form is unstable. The waste stream is domestic sealed sources, special form material, decommissioning sources, dry active waste, instrument articles, debris, and other discarded radioactive material. The volume is 500 cubic feet and the radioactivity is 10 curies. Waste will originate from all U.S. states and territories except Texas and Vermont. Any waste from the northwest, southwestern, or Rocky Mountain compacts will generally require export authorization. And so they have not submitted those, so we would give them up to 5 submittals to provide that information to us. Material will be considered under a small quantity generator set aside so long as the waste from a utility does not come from a nuclear utility, and the agreement would terminate August 31, 2022.
Brandon Hurley, there is a motion. Is there a second?
Richard Ballsburg, second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion about item 5C, the import application of Philotechnics? Any public comment on item 5C? Seeing none, we can move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the import application of Philotechnics represented in item 5C on our agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion passes. The next item on our agenda is item 5D, which is the first of 2 import applications from Duke Energy Brunswick. And we will turn it back over to Vice Chairman Salzman.
This is Commissioner Salzman. The technical committee has received and reviewed an import application from Duke Energy Brunswick, received September 22, 2021, and it's number 1-0325-00. In this case, Brunswick is a generator requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the Act. They have specifically requested authorization for Class C, stable, non-fuel irradiated hardware, and that waste stream was approved by TCEQ in letter correspondence dated October 14, 2021. They've requested a volume of 175 cubic feet and a total radioactivity of 26,950 curies. The waste will originate from North Carolina, which is an unaffiliated state. And they've requested an agreement that would terminate August 31, 2022. And I'll also note that if approved, the application request would need to be treated as contingent since it exceeds the 15,000 curie limit that we set, particularly with regard to irradiated hardware. I would also note that in addition, the applicant indicated they're a small quantity generator, which I assume was perhaps a administrative mistake, but clearly we do not consider utilities to be small quantity generators. The technical committee recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
This is Brandon Hurley. Again, I apologize to those of you who regularly attend our meetings, but a quick recap. We have a policy that any request for a disposal of over 15,000 curies, we grant on a contingent basis. Reason for that was, especially with irradiated hardware and other high volume and high curie count, waste, oftentimes it's hard to measure until it actually is ready for shipment. But we were on paper bumping up against our 275,000 curie cap. But in actuality, when it was finally disposed of, we were never anywhere near it. So in order to avoid having to start denying petitions based on the fact that we had granted 275,000 curies on paper, we began to conditionally grant these large curie requests, and then it becomes a first come, first served basis. Programs worked really well. We've never gotten anywhere near our 275,000 curie cap, and it has allowed us to continue granting these large requests, knowing that in all probability, that actual curie content will never make it to the facility. So it has avoided what I think was a stumbling block that we saw. And that is what we talk about when we talk about a contingent grant of the authority to dispose under an application like this. With that being said, John, this is not irradiated hardware?
This is
It is?
non-fuel irradiated hardware.
Okay, so maybe that's what tripped me up. And it says non-fuel irradiated hardware. Isn't all irradiated hardware non-fuel?
Um,
Yeah.
You know, this is Commissioner Salzman. I'm gonna let Commissioner Edwards answer that question.
Oh, let's do this one. I'm going to say that any irradiated hardware shipment that gets sent to us is going to be non-fuel irradiated hardware. I'm not personally aware of, I mean, fuel is a different thing. And I think they're just trying to distinguish that this is not fuel. That is the purpose. I will have to go back and check though, to see if there's actually any hardware that's considered fuel, but I believe the answer is no.
Because Brandon Hurley, again, by the definition, if it's hardware, then it's not fuel.
Right. So fuel is all about the origin of the material, and the hardware or straps that go around the fuel that's separate. It's not fuel itself.
Okay, makes sense.
Mhm.
Any other questions for the technical committee?
Where would this put us on our annual totals? You know, we granted a whole bunch at the beginning of the year on our curie count. This is about 10% of our total for the year. Just ballpark if you got a feel for it at all.
This is Commissioner Salzman. I'll give me just a moment. I'll look, but I want to say we're at maybe 20 or 30% of the annual limit. We're a long way from running into a situation where we would be concerned.
Okay.
This is Brandon Hurley. And again, even though this is a rather specific amount of curies, it's not a round number. What we have generally found is that with irradiated hardware, by the time they actually get ready to ship, that number shrinks, sometimes significantly, for a variety of reasons. One could be actual measure. Another could be they had a campaign that they were going to do, and then for financial or logistics or whatever reasons, they just don't do it. And so that's the reason we've granted them contingently, because a lot of it washes out. And so it doesn't put us up against that cap.
Yeah, I'm just saying we're relatively early in our year. The cycle's only reason I'm asking, just kind of keeping an eye on it.
Any other questions for the technical committee? Hearing none, I think we can move on to a motion.
This is Commissioner Salzman. I make a motion to approve the import application from Duke Energy Brunswick, number 1-0325-00. The way, pardon me. The waste class is Class C. The waste form is stable. The waste stream is non-fuel irradiated hardware. The volume is 175 cubic feet. The total radioactivity is 26,950 curies, and that will be considered on a contingent basis. Waste will originate from North Carolina. The agreement would terminate August 31, 2022, and we will not consider this as part of a small quantity generator set aside.
Brandon Hurley, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Like a second, but I will comment that there's a person out there that commented that question we had before us is on TCEQ form 20225, which has a category as follows. Quotation NFRCONP, which means non-fuel reactor components.
Thank you. That was Kurt Fogelman. Kurt, we appreciate that answer.
That, second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion among the commissioners on the first import request of Duke Energy Brunswick? I see that Karen Haddon has her hand up, so let me bring her in. Ms. Haddon, did you have a comment?
Maybe on mute.
Hi, can you hear now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to, I'm not hearing it listed, but I'm just wanting to confirm that there's no greater than Class C mixed in here and that there's no control rods involved.
And this is Brandon Hurley. Vice Chairman Salzman, that would be something that would be certified by the TCEQ, correct? So we rely on the TCEQ to confirm exactly what you just said, Karen.
And they did not include that in their report.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on item 5D, the first import application of Duke Energy Brunswick? Seeing none, we can move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the import application of Duke Energy Brunswick, the first of those applications represented in item 5D on our agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion passes. With that, we can move on to item 5E, which is the second import application of Duke Energy Brunswick. And I will turn it back over to the Vice Chairman.
This is Commissioner Salzman. The technical committee has received and reviewed an import application from Duke Energy Brunswick dated September 22, 2021, and it's number 1-0326-00. In this case, Brunswick is a generator requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the act. And they have requested authorization for Class B and Class C unstable spent bead and powdered demineralizer resins, water cleanup filters, DAW, and contaminated equipment. And those waste streams were approved by TCEQ via letter correspondence dated October 14, 2021. They've requested a volume of 1,650 cubic feet and total radioactivity of 450 curies. Again, the waste will originate from North Carolina, which is an unaffiliated state. They requested an agreement that would terminate August 31, 2022. And similarly to the previous import application, we do not consider nuclear utilities a small quantity generator. Technical committee recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any, Brandon Hurley, are there any questions for the technical committee on item 5E, the second import application of Duke Energy Brunswick? Hearing none, I think we can move on to emotions.
This is Commissioner Salzman. I make a motion to approve the import application from Duke Energy Brunswick, number 1-0326-00. The waste class is Class B and Class C. The waste form is unstable. The waste stream is spent bead and powdered demineralizer resins, water cleanup filters, DAW, and contaminated equipment. The volume is 1,650 cubic feet. The total radioactivity is 450 curies. Waste will originate from North Carolina. The agreement would terminate August 31, 2022, and this will not be considered under a small quantity generator set aside.
Brandon Hurley, there is a motion. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion about item 5E, the second import application of Duke Energy Brunswick? I see Karen Haddon has her hand up. Karen, is this from the last time, or did you want to make an additional comment on this one?
I don't know if you heard that, but that was from the last time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on item 5E, the second import application of Duke Energy Brunswick? Hearing none, we will move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the second import application of Duke Energy Brunswick, represented by item 5E in our agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 All opposed, no. Motion passes. With that, we are through with item 5 on our agenda. We can move on to item 6, which is request for amendments to existing import applications. The only one we have under item 6 is represented in 6A, which is the amendment request of Holtec International. And I will turn it back over to the Vice Chairman.
This is Commissioner Salzman. The technical committee has received and reviewed an amendment request from Holtec Decommissioning International LLC. That was received August 13, 2021. And this is number 1-0309-01. Again, Holtec is a generator requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the act. And in this case, Holtec has requested an increase in volume from 16,500 cubic feet to 17,000 cubic feet. And the increase in radioactivity from 560 curies to 2,360 curies. And this was to allow for the removal of additional wastes, including resins and filters. There were no other changes to this import request. And I'll just note that the volume increase is obviously relatively small. The radioactivity increase was much larger. I'm looking at my technical review and I noticed a typo. Hold on one moment. I want to make sure I get the Curie number accurately. Correct. The increase is 1,800. So the total Curie should be 2,360.
Right.
Would be the total Curies with the increase. Again, this is as a result of additional resins and filters. The Curie content increase is actually relatively significant. But I think that's what the amendment process is for. I don't, in my opinion, the increase is reasonable if they're going to send additional volume. In this case, I suspect these are resins that were used for primary water demineralization and filters for primary water. So those can be relatively high in Curie content. I did not go back and check. I believe this is for Oyster Creek, but I'm not 100% certain on the unit that's being decommissioned as a result of for what Holtec is doing. The technical committee recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
This is Brandon Hurley again, just as a quick explanatory note. Our amendment process is obviously less formal than the original application process, and we will allow them to request it by letter. And that's always worked. And I think we always, if there's a question, we do request more information from the generator. But we have always used this letter process. We've never formalized an application for an amendment. And as John said, I think it's always worked. But this is a large Curie request. It's over 3 times what they originally requested. But my understanding, based on what Vice Chairman Salzman just said in my discussions, that even though it's a large Curie request, any questions have been satisfied by the technical committee. So I think that's worth noting. But with that, I'll open it up to any other questions for the technical committee.
I was just going to comment. This is Commissioner Edwards, that at this point, these may be estimates of the Curies. So they're looking ahead, I imagine, and planning what they're going to do for the year, and it's a pretty round number, 1,800. So I suspect it's an estimate, and we may see refinement of those numbers when the actual shipments come in.
John, could you look at item 9 on their questionnaire? It says waste will originate from Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York. Let's see, Massachusetts and New York are unaffiliated states. New Jersey is part of the Atlantic Compact. So it doesn't seem like it's coming from a single particular project or source.
This is Commissioner Salzman. You're correct. I do believe that this particular entity, Holtec, this work is being done as a result of a decommissioning for a plant. If it's for multiple plants, I'm not aware. And I think perhaps the reasoning behind listing multiple states is that plant served multiple states, as I recall.
I see Dave Carlson shaking his head. Would you like to come up and help us? Again, please state your name so everyone knows who's speaking.
So this is Dave Carlson, the president of WCS. So the 3 states, there's 3 plants actually. So Oyster Creek is in New Jersey, Pilgrim is in Massachusetts, and Indian Point 1, 2, and 3 are in New York.
Okay.
So all 3 of those states are potential origination points. I don't know the precise genesis of this additional request, but just this year, CDI Holtec has assumed responsibility for the point. So that would be an additional 7 plants that they did not have.
Thank you.
Dave, you dropped
Your
something.
pin fell down.
And this is Commissioner Salzman. I would also note that the waste from the Atlantic that's coming out of the Atlantic Compact theoretically could go to the Atlantic Compact disposal site. However, Holtec has made a business decision to send it to Texas rather than
In
the Atlantic.
and this is Brandon Hurley. I'll add to that, that in conversations with the Atlantic Compact, we've posed the question, does this upset y'all? If they're sending waste out of your compact when you have a facility, and the answer has been resoundingly no.
Yeah.
We're okay with it. So,
I have a question.
Judge, oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Sodick.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Sodak. I, for one, feel quite uncomfortable with this. I mean, it seems to me that when you have had an application and then you simply, with a wave of the hand or with a basically 2-paragraph letter, ask that it be tripled or something, and tripled or quadrupled, and in Curies, and that and in the one non-boilerplate paragraph, TCEQ puts a comma in the wrong place, and that makes it look like a lot more even. But I just think that that they should be required to give us more information on this in a more formal way, the generators. And so I do feel uncomfortable on this particular
And
requirement. I mean, I think it's all well and good for us to make informal telephone inquiries and say, well, we think this and we think that, and Oyster Creek, this and that. And they must be going along and they must be reserving and it's a round number and so on. But there comes a point where it seems to me they can do a little bit more than just send us a short letter and say, oh, by the way, triple it up or whatever.
and this is Brandon Hurley again. So what information would you require of them?
Well, I think they should should have filed another application, with the full, with more information even if it wouldn't bother me too much if it were contained in a letter, but this simply says, this is what we want to, this is what we want, and acts as if it's routine. I don't think it is routine.
Chairman,
I have a comment to his, I believe.
Judge, you may want to turn on your mic.
Huh?
It's on the molding underneath. There.
I believe what Commissioner Stoddard's saying is right, but, and I got to reviewing the letter. Ashley didn't sign this letter. The first one signed, but, and so I don't know who put that on there. You know what I'm saying? It's not a new letter from TCEQ. Or there's no authentic letter from TCEQ.
TCQ cert should be in the packet. There's a TCQ certification. This is Stephen Ryan's executive director. There's a TCQ certification letter. And a letter request from Andrea Sturtis, I believe. In my conversion of her email to me to the PDF, it would not allow the transfer of that because she has that protected. I assume she has a valid reason for not allowing the transfer of that, but she did in fact sign that, and there was a signed version of Andrea Sturtis's request. It just, I could not convert it into the PDF for y'all's packet.
And where's Andrea Sturgis work?
She works for
It's
Holtec.
Holtec.
So the TCQ's
The
approved this on
TCQ
there?
No, the TCQ certification
Is signed.
is signed. Yeah,
page
That's for the
48.
first 500, right?
yeah, for the first.
Well,
No,
There's a September 2 letter, Judge, that deals with this update.
yes.
And it says upon the completion of the import application with a signature, given the same information, the TCEQ's certification of import does not complete, finalize, or guarantee the final acceptance of a shipment. Because I don't quite follow that, but I don't know. It just seems to me I don't know what would be a minor change, but this does not walk and quack like a minor change to me.
So back to the judge's comment. This is Brandon Hurley. So do we think that cert letter is for the original and not for the amended request? Since it's dated September 2nd?
No, it is.
This is Commissioner Salzman. That TCEQ letter is for this amendment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason it's, this is Stephen Ryan's executive director, the reason it's dated September 2nd, I believe that to respond, TCEQ got the amendment request the date after our deadline for the September 16th meeting. They went ahead and processed the certification back on that date, assuming it would be in the September 16th packet.
Okay.
But because they missed our deadline of close of business October 12th, certification was just done earlier than it normally would be done because of that process. But that is the certification for this amendment request.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Thank you.
And the commission has a signed copy of TCQ's letter.
Yes.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, go ahead, Vice Chairman.
Commissioner Salzman, it's also probably worth noting that in fact, this particular amendment request would not require a new certification from TCEQ because they did not add any additional waste streams or any information that TCEQ would need to approve. All they added was curies and volume. That waste stream that they listed was already included in their original application. So in this case, there's nothing that TCEQ technically has to approve to allow this additional material to come into the compact.
Okay, so we know, I take it that this is not material that is different in character than the original application?
This is Commissioner Salzman. That's correct. Dick, this material that they listed, the waste stream, is already included in their original application. They're just increasing the volume and the curies. They're not adding any additional waste streams.
And Commissioner Edwards, I know had something to say.
I would just comment that, excuse me, I don't actually share your concern, Commissioner Sadek. It appears to me that TCEQ has approved these particular waste streams. The company sending them to us estimated a volume and curie content. If their original estimate had been whatever the final estimate with their amendment now is, we would have approved it. And similarly, this is just they're just saying, we're going to send more waste than we originally planned on. It does sort of raise your eyebrows that it's a small amount of volume compared to the increase in the curies. But if you're looking at resins and filters in particular can have a significant impact on the curies that would be offered for disposal versus other waste streams have lower concentration of curies in that volume. But ultimately, our job is to say, can the waste come in or not? And given that it meets the waste form requirements and TCEQ is accepting that, then we look at, is there enough room for it? And if there is, then I think it is appropriate to approve it.
Any other questions for the technical committee? If not, I think we can move on to a motion.
This is Commissioner Salzman. I make a motion to approve the amendment request for Holtec Decommissioning International LLC. It's number 1-0309-01. We will increase the volume from 16,500 to 17,000 cubic feet. That is 500 cubic feet. And we'll increase the radioactivity from 560 curies to 2,360 curies. That's a 1,800 curie increase.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on item 6A, the amendment request of Holtec? Any public comment?
Yes,
Karen Hadden.
thanks. I really appreciated the comment by Commissioner Sadek. I do think that this is an item that should have a separate application with more information. What I'm wondering about right now is whether we are seeing any, and I think TCEQ maybe needs to answer this for you and for all of us. Are we already seeing the results of NRC attempting to declassify, reclassify greater than Class C waste to where some of it is fitting into the Class C? Because it seems like there's a great increase going on in radioactivity. And this is the early start of decommissioning across the country. And my understanding is Holtec has a contract for all of the low-level decommissioning waste for the country. So I think this needs to be done right away, right now, and that it's very, very urgent. And I would urge you to step back a little bit and make this be a second application, get a little more information before moving forward on this.
Thank you very much, Karen. Let me ask this question and more of a, this is Brandon Hurley. Have we ever required someone when they've requested an amendment to go back and file a new application?
This is Commissioner Salzman. I'm not aware that we've ever required an applicant to submit a new application when they requested an amendment. I know there were several, early on, there were several times when they would request amendments that
there was a time when people would ask for amendments to extend the time.
Extend the time.
And we said no to those.
We sort of got to the point where that was creating technical issues with trying to keep track of when queries were disposed of. And so we moved away from that. The only other issue with regard to amendments that I can recall is whether we would allow the addition of waste streams or things like that to be considered as part of a minor amendment. And we decided early on, no, waste streams. If you're going to add waste streams, then that can't be a minor amendment. If you're going to add curies or volume, that cannot be a minor amendment. Those are the only issues I recall with regard to amendments.
And commissioners, I will also note, Jim Buckley is with us on the Zoom call, and he is a representative of Holtec. So does anyone have any questions for him that we need to ask to clarify this?
This is Commissioner Sadek. I have another just general question, and that is, have we ever granted an amendment of this size, like 4 times what the original was, in curies or volume or anything?
This is Commissioner Salzman. I'm thinking back and actually I did not have time to go back and try to review all the amendment requests we've ever granted.
You have it.
I did not. I do not, I have to admit, I do not recall ever granting a curie request like this big, unless it's possible we had one under an irradiated hardware where they needed more curies. That's possible that we did under that scenario. Obviously the volume increase is actually relatively small compared to the original request. So that's really not an issue. So I don't think we've ever granted a curie increase by this amount. It is possible we did it under or radiated hardware.
See, the one concern or question, let me rephrase it. The question I have is, should we, as a matter of policy, since this is coming from, as I understand from Mr. Carlston, 3 distinct plants, one of which is in a compact, should we carve off that one plant that is in a compact, the Atlantic compact, and deal with that differently than we do the other 2? Now, that's just for general contemplation.
And I think this obviously strikes, this is Brandon Hurley, this strikes at a administrative and policy-driven decision about what an amendment is and what it should be and where we think the line falls on if it ever gets so large that we should simply require a new application. But in my opinion, obviously I would defer to people with technical expertise as to what that process should be and if they feel comfortable with it. And based on what both John and Lisa have said, to me, it makes sense that the amendment process is working, and I suppose everyone gets to vote. So we'll see how the vote goes. But if there was a technical reason or there was information needed, and we feel like we aren't getting the full picture of what the amendment request is about, I could understand that. But I feel as though, based on what everyone has said, we have received the full technical set of information that we need to feel comfortable that this falls within all of the same parameters that were in the original application. It is just truly an increase in curies and volume. And the reason we never wanted to include an increase in curies and volume in a minor amendment is because of our caps. And so that was the reason that we never allowed that to be a minor amendment process. But I don't know that we ever said that it needed to be an amendment process because we had a concern about whether or not a large increase like this was going to have some sort of material impact on the way we operate.
I have a suggestion.
Yes, Lisa.
This is Commissioner Edwards. For this particular request, I, unless something new comes out of the conversation, intend to approve or vote to approve the request. However, I'd like to ask if the technical committee might consider that rather than just a letter, that in addition to the letter, they take their original form and make changes on their original submittal so that it would be a finalized form that clearly indicates the waste stream and what has changed. And it'd be signed by the folks and we'd have it in our permanent records. It truly, if the application had come with this total volume and total queries in it the first time through, it would have passed.
Yeah.
Okay. There's just someone who made an estimate and they're with new information or apparently revising that estimate. And it's no guarantee that they will actually ship that amount. Even when they request the imports, as we well know. I think I will vote to approve this request, but Chairman
And-
Salzman, would you?
And before we get to that, Jim Buckley from Holtec has actually raised his hand. So I want to make sure we have an opportunity to hear from him. So Mr. Buckley, are you on?
I am on, Commissioner Hurley. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Yes, I am the one, Commissioner Edwards, as you pointed out, revised the estimate associated with a specific resin waste stream out of our Pilgrim plant. And that was due to the fact at the time of the submittal of the initial request for import, I did not have the total results of the analysis from that particular resin quantity. And so with that opportunity of needing to revise that amount, approximately 900 curies associated with that analysis, and I'd be happy to provide any details necessary to support the technical committee of that. I did take the opportunity to also just check with our Oyster Creek facility, the Pilgrim facility, which I sit at, as well as the New York IPEC facility, as Dave Carlson mentioned, just to round off that number to ensure that we had any anticipated resin shipments for this calendar year or fiscal year, I should state, for that particular amendment request. So again, I'd be happy to provide any detailed information that would be helpful. But as you point out, if I had caught that initial submittal that took place in August of 2021 for our renewal, I would have revised that 560 to a higher number at that point in time. But as I did not, I felt and consulted, what should be the process to identify that so we could make that shipment. And this amendment, letter was suggested, and that was the mechanism. So there's no significant changes in, our processes. It was just the timeliness of the characterization results that I needed in order to support the overall annual forecast. So that's maybe a long-winded answer that I just wanted to share with the group. And if there's any specific questions, I'd be happy to address those.
Thank you very much, Mr. Buckley. Anyone have questions for Mr. Buckley?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Edwards. Mr. Buckley, thank you for that explanation. Just to make sure I'm clear, you had an original estimate for a curie content of some resin, but you did not actually have the sample results back. And based upon the sample results, you're revising your estimate higher and then applying that same reasoning to other facilities that you ship waste from, increase the curie amount to ensure that there is a large enough envelope in the event that other samples came back with a higher curie amount than you originally estimated. Is that right?
That is exactly correct, and well stated.
And all waste will be Class C or lower.
That is correct. These are typically Class C resins or Bravo B, classification resins
Mhm.
associated with that. We do have some alpha or A, Class A resins and filters as well.
Thank you.
That
I
would be
was just
included.
trying to clarify that nothing would be greater than Class C.
That is correct.
Thank you, Commissioner Edwards. Again, it's Brandon Hurley.
Your Commissioner, this is Stephen Rains, Executive Director. The process question suggestion that you had about having them resubmit their application so we could get an updated form for you to see on what the adjustments are. We can have them edit their entry or create a process by which to allow for that to be seen by the commissioners in an edited form for you to see what changes have been made. That would require us either administratively, we could adjust their forms. You could see that, or we could ask them to resubmit through our portal on their form to adjust what changes are made to that. That's relatively easy to do and not burdensome, I would think, on those requesting amendments of this kind.
I wasn't suggesting that we should change our processes or implement new requirements on the spot. I was suggesting that the technical committee should consider whether that would be appropriate process improvement that would avoid this kind of dilemma in the future. If Mr. Buckley or Holtec is amenable to going online and adjusting it, maybe we can solve the problem. But I didn't want to delay if there were any planned shipments. Type B casts are hard to schedule. So if they need the import license to support any shipments, then, doing a process change here, just like that, probably is.
Easily done.
I would encourage us to consider it and get a recommendation from the technical committee at the next meeting, whether that change should be implemented.
Commissioner Sadick.
It's just a general question, but it strikes me that the decommissioning of nuclear plants is accelerating these days and will probably accelerate even more, that it'll snowball as we go along. And so I would assume that we will see more of this as these questions come up, particularly when outfits like Holtec are handling a bunch of different reactors in the decommissioning process. So I would, as I say, I would feel more comfortable with more information, but I also would kind of suggest that we're going to see much more of this as we go along. They'll ask for a relatively low routine amount and then amend because it's accelerated.
Yes, I think I agree with you. And I think that's based on the increase in decommissioning activity. I think that's obviously something that's probably should be expected. Commissioner Morris.
This is Linda Morris. I have a general comment. We might recommend to petitioners, current and future petitioners that are out there listening today, that they might make sure that when they submit a petition that they supply additional information. For example, the Qualtech petition today that we approved, if we had known before the meeting, or actually the last meeting, that these sources they've been using on their own for training purposes, we never would have had a question about status being of a generator. We also had at the last meeting some petitions from South Texas Project and Comanche Peak. And if the STP had been able to tell us the details, like they only needed 25 days of emergency supply area, that would have been helpful. And I think, and today, if we had known some of the things that Mr. Buckley provided, I think that would smooth the process and reduce some of the conversations we're having. So maybe keep that in mind as you guys out there submit your petitions for us to review. If you can provide any supporting information that might to make the process go more smoothly.
And I think along those same, this is Brandon Hurley. I think along those same lines, we might request that anyone seeking an amendment includes some sort of statement in that letter that says, and no other changes in the form of the waste, the type of waste, anything that basically isn't being changed by the amendment is reaffirmed in that letter. So we can, again, which I think is a conclusion we've already come to, but that way we can say they have affirmed under their signature that in fact, the only requested changes are what's in the letter and there won't be any other changes to any of the information that was provided in the original application.
This is Commissioner Edwards. Of course, if in the future we adopt that they amend the
Right.
original application, all of that will be covered.
Right. Commissioner Salzman.
Thank you. This is Commissioner Salzman. I did want to address one issue that was brought up by a fellow commissioner, and that is that we should perhaps have had Holtec file an import application for each plant that they're decommissioning. And I think we have to also consider how we treat other generators. TVA is a generator with multiple plants, and we never made TVA submit an import application for each plant that they generate power at. Exelon was another generator with multiple plants that we did not submit an individual application for each plant that they manage. So if the commission wants to move in that direction, we can, but I think we also have to consider how we've handled other generators. And in that respect, I don't see Holtec as being a different generator. They're a different kind of generator. They're a decommissioning generator, but in fact, they are still a generator with multiple sites like TVA or Exelon or other utilities. And so whatever we decide to do, I think we need to be sure we do it the same for everyone.
John, it was based on the fact that one of them was in a compact, and it was whether we should deal with the one that is in a compact differently than the ones that are not in a compact. So that was the question. It wasn't based on multiple sources per se, or on the Atlantic compact. So, excuse me.
This is Lisa Edwards. Don't we also deal with that already with brokers that accept waste from multiple generators from different compacts? And up till now, we have allowed them with the condition that if the generator is from a certain compact, we'd have to have the release. But I mean, we already do that, right?
Well, I've raised this question before when we're dealing with brokers, and the consensus was brokers are dealing with relatively small sources per se versus a single decommissioning power plant. So it's just, I guess at the root is, if there's an alternative disposal facility in a compact, should we be giving our capacity ultimately to use for something could be disposed of in another facilities, basically use up somebody else's capacity or use ours up is what it comes to.
And this is Brandon Hurley. That is one of the questions in your analysis, correct? Do they have an alternate place for disposal?
This is Commissioner Salzman. That's correct. We have, I don't think we've ever to date said, well, if you have an alternate location, you have to ship to that alternate location. I think
But we do consider it.
But we do consider it. We've allowed generators or brokers to make a business decision with regard to where they dispose of waste, assuming if they have an alternate location, that alternate location allows them to ship that material out of the compact.
Yeah, I'm just raising it for discussion consideration. I will say the trend, and this is kind of echoing a couple of comments, the trend is the volumes and the curie counts at this facility, what we're considering, is increasing substantially every year. Even 2 years ago, when I first came on, it was minor compared to what we're starting to deal with now. So I'm just saying, looking forward, I'm not saying I'm gonna vote against this, I'm gonna vote for this one today, but I'm just saying, for future consideration, do we need to start thinking about preserving our capacity, our annual curie caps, things like that for planning purposes?
I think that's a good point, and you may be stealing some of Lisa's thunder when she gets to the capacity committee, but I do think that is a consideration as we get closer to it.
Yeah.
But things like that, or the type of adjustments we need to make to have a better sense of how much we're using, where it's going, and if we have to start making very hard decisions about which out of compact importer gets in and which one gets out, I think that becomes very, very relevant. Because then at that point, we're literally, there's 10 children and 7 pieces of candy, and we got to decide who gets them. So I agree with you. That makes sense. Any other comments?
Just to be clear, my kids get the candy.
Any other public comments? We appreciate Mr. Buckley's comments and his assistance in this.
Do the generators know what we're talking about now? I mean, Lisa's kind of said, I just want to make sure they know what we want. Because they will do what we want. They just need to know what we want.
This is Commissioner Salzman. You've raised a good point, Judge. And I believe that Mr. Raines and I will need to have a discussion, and then I think we will need to clearly communicate
To the generator.
to the generators and brokers if we want to change things or request additional information or change the process in some fashion. You need to clearly communicate that so that we receive what we expect.
But the overarching standard has always been submit to us the information that is necessary for us to be able to assess whether or not it should be approved or not. And so that's very vague and broad, I know, but I think what this discussion is just kind of being more specific in providing those generators that kind of information of this is what we expect to see, so we don't have to, so we have the information we need to make our determination. So I think what John's saying is absolutely correct. As we further refine that, we may say, in these instances, we expect you to provide this level of information. And I think that's just something that, the tech committee has to develop, and then we have to send out.
Yeah, my dog in this fight was just make sure TCEQ is covered with all these. I don't want us to prove 1,000 curies and then 2 months down the road, somebody come in, well, that's really 3,500. And that's never been TCEQ's river. I don't want them thinking that. I don't think that's the way it is today, but without that letter being signed, you kind of like, wait a minute. And so that was my only deal in this whole thing.
I mean, based on what Stevens told us, I believe TCEQ has fully vetted this amendment request, not just the original, but the amendment request. So I'm fully comfortable with that. Any other discussion or comments? Any other public comments? Hearing none, we can move on to a vote. I think based on the discussion and some expressed opinions, it's probably appropriate to take a roll call vote on this one.
This is Commissioner Salzman. I know I made the motion.
And it was seconded.
It was seconded.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
I mean,
I'll do it. So with that, we will do a roll call vote. I will call out each commissioner. If you would please indicate aye or nay. Vice Chairman Salzman,
Aye.
Judge Dolgener,
all right.
Commissioner Saudick,
No.
Commissioner Morris,
Aye.
Commissioner Edwards,
Aye.
and Commissioner Mundy.
Aye.
Please show the chair voting aye as well. One of the, oh, I'm sorry,
Bradford.
Peter's still on?
No, he had to get off.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we will not call on Commissioner Bradford, but on a vote of 6-1, motion passes. With that, we are through with item 6 on our agenda. We can move on to item 7, which is our report from WCS. We will invite Mr. Carlson to the podium.
But you're on.
Microphone on.
That's the one that doesn't light up. We learned last time.
Does it
So
work?
yeah, it's,
Okay.
and if you would, Dave, would you tilt the screen back a little bit just so we can get, there we go. Perfect.
I can stand back or something too. I know last
No.
time it was difficult. I'm David Carlson. I'm the President of Waste Control Specialists, here to give a report on the site. So first off, our Texas fiscal year ended at the end of August, and so I'll give numbers for last fiscal year. In compact disposal was a bit over 9,300 cubic feet and a bit over 26,000 curies. Out of compact was 16,900 and some cubic feet and 57,000 curies. Total curies on that, since we've been discussing curies, was about 80,000, which is certainly not near the highest number that we've ever hit and is well below the 225,000 curie annual limit. In the current fiscal year, we've only got a month so far. So we've got the month of September, so it's very low in compact, a bit over 600 cubic feet and 29 curies, and out of compact, a bit over 2,000 and 8,000 curies in that case. Our total to date disposed cubic feet is 2,200 cubic feet, and that's over 10 years, and that's about 2.5% of our licensed capacity.
Sorry, this is Commissioner Salzman. What was that volume again?
So 220,000, I said that wrong. About 220,000 cubic feet so far, which is about 2.5% of our total licensed capacity. So again, that's over 10 years. So you can kind of get a sense of how many years of licensed capacity we still have. In terms of curies, it's 500,000 curies, and that is 12.8% of our licensed capacity. Due to radioactive decay, our analysis certainly says at the rates we're seeing, we won't reach that licensed capacity. We're certainly within a reasonable lifetime of the facility. In terms of quarterly payments that we paid at TCEQ and that we paid at Andrews County, our most recent payments were $1.5 million to TCEQ and $350,000 to Andrews County. Totals to date on those are about $64 million paid to TCEQ over the last 10 years. And $14.5 million paid to Andrews County, or a total of about $78 million. And that, I believe, is all I have to report today.
Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. A couple of questions. First of all, just a clarification, and Stephen, you might have to be the one that responds to this. I have a couple of pages in the packet here for the commission on this report. It doesn't include the total numbers that were just presented, or am I looking at the report incorrectly, the 220,000?
No, the pages, your pages in your presentation does not include the data that we have from his most recent report.
Are you talking about the information from WCS or your data?
The information from WCS that Mr. Carlson just reported year to date, or life of facility to date, 220,000. I don't see that on my screen anywhere.
And I think it's because there is not a life of site report. I think this is only for the period covered 9/1/21. Oh,
In prior meetings,
One
we
more.
have received a report that gave percentage of
life of site.
volume, and then also for curies too.
That would be included, I believe, Dave, in your semi-annual reports that you provide, and I can provide that to you as
Yeah,
well,
I know
right?
we do provide it periodically. I'm not
And
sure
we used,
of the period is.
But it would not be in these monthly reports that are in there, but we
Okay.
can provide that in a separate report. What I've provided in the packet is the monthly reports we get from WCS
I
at
understand.
the beginning of each month.
Okay, that's very helpful. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something or not reading something correctly. Since we're working on the metrics, numbers are of interest to me right now. Mr. Carlson, so you have reported these numbers relative to the total license capacity. But I think that there are a number of generators in compact that are actually interested in the total volume and curies that, well, curies wouldn't apply, the total volume that's utilized of the constructed space.
Right, so we have 450,000 cubic feet.
I can't hear you very well, I'm sorry.
We have 450,000 cubic feet of constructed space today, and 220,000 of that is used.
What was the last number?
Got it.
Second number?
220,000 is used today.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm fine.
So it's about half.
Okay. And okay.
So when you say 220,000 cubic feet has actually been disposed of and there was 450,000 constructed, if I equate that to a little less than 50% utilize, it would imply almost 100%. The packaging efficiency. So if there's 220,000 cubic feet of waste that's been actually disposed of, and it has void space and fill volume between packages, and that 220,000 cubic feet, what portion of the volume of the 450,000 feet of constructed space do you estimate is utilized?
So when I talked about 450,000 cubic feet of constructed space, that means accounting for all the packaging efficiency and so on. So the actual hole that's been dug is many times larger than that. So that accounts for actual waste going in.
That is very useful information.
So
Thank
the-
you for that
So
clarification.
the 450 would be the number we should use for our analysis and granting permits.
Right, that's how much we can get into that space. But I would like to say, Commissioner, that before we got to the point of even being close to filling up that space, we will certainly have the next expansion put in place.
And I can't remember, and I think Commissioner Janetka one time answered this question. I've just forgotten his answer, but is there a complete total curie cap on the built-out facility or in concentration limits?
No, sir. So
Okay.
that the Curie cap is relative to the entire facility.
Okay. And so on this built-out facility, if we keep rolling along with the 275 annual cap, there's no problems about running up again. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Carlson, I have a question. This is Brandon Hurley. I know at one point, the concrete liner only went up about half. Has the concrete liner requirement been withdrawn by TCEQ for the remainder of the cell?
We've actually completed the concrete liner to the top level.
Okay. So it is still a requirement,
It is still a
and
requirement.
it's been done up to the top of that cell?
Yes.
Any other questions for Mr. Carlson?
I do.
I'm sorry.
Under the Curies, I want to just make sure I understand their report correctly. There is a column near the end that talks about there's a number of columns related to approved activity, received activity. Thank you.
You bet.
And then there's a column relative to decay based on total received activity and remaining based on decayed activity. And I just want to make sure that when I read the last thing that says remaining based on decayed activity, approved decay, it says 121,659 curies. And remaining on received activity has the same number, almost exactly the same, 121,623.41 versus 121,659.58. So the second column isn't really decay corrected other than some really minor activity or shipment that was approved. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I don't have that in front of me right now, so I'm not sure.
Well, the last column and the third to last column, one is remaining based on received activity. So the activity that was actually approved and received. It's the third to last column. Yeah, that's not what I'm comparing.
Yeah,
though.
I know.
So there's 121 for received activity, 121,000 and some change
I
of
see
received
that, and that's
activity.
confusing to me too. Let me take a look at that
Mhm.
and get back to you with an answer because like you, it doesn't jump out and make sense right.
Thank you. Mhm. Did the commissioners understand that?
Yes, I did.
Yep.
Any other questions for Mr. Carlson? Thank you very much.
Well,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. When you say approved decayed, I take it there is a Exactly what does that refer to? Maybe I'm re-asking the same question.
Right,
but
so we have a capacity.
Who
that's-
approved and what,
Right,
what's
so we
the
have an
total?
approved capacity in terms of curies on our license, and that would be decayed curies. So as the radioactivity goes away, that rolls off the total.
And this is according to your existing license.
That's our existing
Yes.
license.
I see.
The existing license allows decayed correction.
Yeah,
Yeah, that.
I came up early in the side.
Right,
Okay, so
radioactivity doesn't-
given that I take it your waste stream has increased and is likely, we assume, to increase significantly, it strikes me that you now have half of the constructed filled. It strikes me that it's not going to be very long before you're going to have to start building, adding to the capacity. I asked a general question about that last time and you gave a kind of a general answer, but what are your projections showing? I mean, you must have some pretty fine line projections on that at this point.
We do, just to generalize though, to start with, if you take last year, we disposed of about 25,000 cubic feet. So if you project that forward, you can count a number of years to use the remaining capacity. We don't see that, increasing asymptotically or some, extremely rapid increase like that. It is a painstaking and careful process that takes part in a nuclear power plant. And so the ones that we're working with, again, they have reasonably long duration schedules. I think the public schedule that they're putting out for Oyster Creek is completion in about 2025. I think Pilgrim may be out to 2027. So typically you're going to see those spread over quite a few years, Commissioner. So it's not like we expect a sharp spike of an increase.
What sort of additional capital investment would that involve?
Expansion of the cell?
Yeah, to bring the cell to expand it.
It's certainly in the millions of dollars, but that's anticipated and planned for by the company.
I'm sorry, the what?
It would be in the millions of dollars, but certainly that expenditure is anticipated, planned for by the company.
The big millions of dollars, or the little millions of dollars?
I don't have an estimate in front of me, but it's several millions of dollars.
Several.
Concrete side.
Yeah.
Rick Jacoby raised his hand. I wanted to make sure that if Rick had something that was going to answer a previous question or comment on, I wanted to give him the opportunity to speak.
Can we take a break for 5 minutes? A fellow commissioner would like a break.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He's pointing at me.
I'm not pointing to anybody, but.
So I think we're about to be done with Mr. Carlson. Let's finish that very quickly. And then, Rick, did you have something you needed to add? I think you're on mute.
No, I didn't have anything to say. It's an operator error.
Oh, okay. Any other questions for Mr. Carlson then?
Thank you for being so clear.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Based on the request of the left side of the dais, we will take a 10-minute break. So we will be back at about 12:06. Missing anybody? Okay, the time is 12:12 p.m. We're back on the record at the meeting of the Texas Low-Level Radioactive Waste Disposal Compact Commission. We have completed item 7, which was a report from WCS. We can move on to item 8, which is the chairman's report. Many of you were at the low-level forum meeting that was in Denver. You might have attended in person or virtually, but it was an incredible success. Dan Shrum is to be congratulated on establishing a very good meeting in very hard circumstances. Several of us were participated as in a panel that discussed our new management rule and the working group that the forum has now that is related to that same issue. And I thought it was a good success, and I appreciate Stephen and John and Linda being willing to participate in that. The next meeting, which we will also talk about when we get to our meetings of the Lowell Forum, will be in San Antonio. So we will need to have a good showing at that to show that we support the low-level forum when they come to our state. The plan will hopefully be that we can schedule a meeting in San Antonio around the low-level forum meeting. And that way people who want to participate in both can. Dan, I hate to put you on the spot, but what is the date in San Antonio?
April 6th and 7th.
6th and 7th? So we will try to time our meetings out to where we will have a meeting around that time as well. We'll look into places to have that meeting in San Antonio, again, hopefully close to where the forum meeting will be. The forum, again, is, I think, going really well. It has established a line of communication among the compacts, which I think is important. It is beneficial to everyone to kind of all be on the same page, and it has really allowed us to do that. It is also, I think, the forum is moving forward in a way that we're getting to the point where addressing some of the issues on a national level really are starting to occur, including, relations with the NRC and other federal agencies. And so it has been very beneficial. Second item on my report is fiscal and budget updates. Not much to report there. As we all know, our budget is a little bit less this year, so we have to watch our spending a little bit. I don't see it being a problem, but we will continue to watch that closely with Diane. If it does begin to become a problem, we will just let everyone know of the things we have to do to tighten our belt a little bit. There is a new reimbursement form that may change things like mileage. So if you're going to make a request, depending on when you actually incurred the expense, you may need to get the new reimbursement form. Obviously, like I said, I think so. I think Diane sent it out, but just make sure when you're filling it out that you're filling out the right one. Is there any questions about the low-level form or budget issues? Well, with that, then I will conclude the chairman's report, and I'll move on to item 9 in the agenda, which is the executive director's report. I'll turn it over to Stephen.
Thanks, Chairman Hurley. This is Stephen Rains, Executive Director of the Commission. I wanted to give you all a brief update on where we're at in the sunset review process. As we continue through that process, I want to recognize Robert Romig is here on behalf of the Sunset Advisory Commission, as he is the lead of the review team that's watching over what as the commission addresses their evaluation of what it is that we're doing and the recommendations they'll make to the legislature and the full Sunset Commission in that process. We've already had a couple of meetings with the Sunset Advisory Commission, with their staff, and with some of the commissioner staff themselves have come by for a meeting. And I wanted to update you on where we're at on that, and where also you'll see in the slide deck that you have in front of you, the Lieutenant Governor has appointed commissioners for the Senate side of the Sunset Advisory Commission, but the House has not appointed commissioners yet. So as the schedule will be approved by the commission, when the full commissioners are appointed, they will give us a schedule, and we have a better idea of when our public hearing will take place in front of the Sunset Commission for the public to make comments on the Sunset's review of us and the recommendations and process. But since we don't have a full commission appointed yet, we don't know the schedule. That being said, I think it's anticipated, and Mr. Romig, tell me if I'm incorrect, but it's anticipated we may have our public hearing sometime next May or June. Does that match up with what still the schedule we expect anyway? June, July, somewhere in there. And that will be a public meeting up here at the Capitol that the commissioners will be able to ask questions of probably Chairman Hurley and myself and whoever wants to show up from the commission. And also the public will have opportunity to comment as well during that process. The review began on October the 1st. We had, as I mentioned earlier, an initial meeting with them, and I've had a follow-up meeting, and we'll probably have several follow-up meetings to answer questions from the commission staff and the review team. And hopefully y'all have received letters that went out from the commission to each of you as members of this commission to address concerns and how you will be interacting with the Sunset staff in the future. I assume you all have all received those letters. It should be an email, correct, Robert? They would have come from, Robert, who would they have been sourced from? I'm not sure actually.
I have not received one.
We might need to follow up on that then.
Yeah, I don't think I have either, actually. So
I'm glad we clarified that here. Well, I'll follow up with Mr. Romig and make sure we gave him your email addresses. And it should communicate with you what your role in the process will be and how you'll interact with Sunset as commissioners. Obviously, my role is a little bit different as executive director. Megan and I will have that, but we'll follow up and make sure you receive those emails. I'm glad we clarified that here. But we expect to have a review from the Sunset team and recommendations to the full commission on us sometime in April of next year. And as we go through that process, we'll keep you updated on what's anticipated to be in that report and then give you a copy of the full report for this commission when that comes out so you can review the recommendations. And if we want to make comment from there, whether you agree or disagree with those recommendation changes, and be prepared for that discussion in front of the full Sunset Advisory Commission in June or July, whenever that occurs.
And just quickly, I will say, in my personal opinion, the Sunset process is one of the smartest things Texas government's ever done. It is the way to keep everybody honest and improve a process that is always subject to being improved. And I think it is a intelligent way to make our government work as best we can. So while it's obviously involved, I think it's well worth the effort. And I really am excited about the idea of what it can do for our commission in ways of improving our processes, maybe identifying some areas that we need some legislative help on. And so I think the Sunset process works exactly the way it's supposed to. And I view it as an opportunity and not a burden by all means. So that is my 2 cents on it. Any other questions about the Sunset process?
Yeah, I have a question. Given that this is a federal, this commission is governed by federal law, and it involves 2 states. It seems to me, I have no quarrel with the idea of sunsets and sunset commissions and all that. It's, to my way of thinking, possibly not just a good piece of legislation from the Texas legislature, but better than any of the others. But it seems to me a kind of an odd fit. I mean, is the idea that supposing they say, listen, enough already, we're gonna sunset this
They cannot do that.
show.
We're not subject to being sunset. We're only subject to recommendation.
I see. Okay. And is that clearly understood?
Yeah, very, very clearly.
Our organic statute is a federal statute by Congress. We are inherently a federal entity, but like Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, a lot of things get delegated to states. So, but the commission itself and the compact itself is a federal creature.
And our statute sets out very clearly that we are to be subject to the sunset process, but not subject to actually being sunset. It will only be recommendations.
I see.
So we're not abolishable, but the thinking behind this, if I can speak, and Mr. Roman can correct me if I'm wrong, when the Texas legislature chose to have this commission reviewed by the Sunset Commission, it was because they had never gone through a sunset review and were very young in the development. And as TCEQ goes through their sunset process, it was the legislature's decision to have us go through at the same time that TCEQ does go through their sunset process and review what duties are appropriate for this commission and what duties should be appropriately delegated to other commissions, and make sure we're fulfilling our function as well, and what the Texas legislature would like to put in their statutory requirements on this commission. that they can do through their statute.
Okay.
If they could cut our generous paychecks. That's a joke for the public. We are not compensated as commissioners. That was just a joke.
Any other questions about the sunset process? Stephen, thank you very much. With that, we have now concluded item 9 on our agenda. We can now move on to item 10, which is a Rules Committee report. And I will turn it over to Chairman Morris, who is the chair of our Rules Committee.
Thank you, Chairman Hurley. Commissioners, in your electronic packet, you will find copies of the draft rules that we're working on right now. So these were included in your packets. So you can get an idea of the direction in which we're heading and start taking a look at some of these draft rules. By the way, they are confidential draft rules at this point. In the packet is 67031 tax 675.20 definitions. You'll see we've added 2 definitions. In 675.21, the export rule, we added simply a phrase allowing waiving of the posting time for approval of export permits in certain conditions. So that was a short phrase that that Chairman Hurley added. And then 675.24, the so-called management rule, there are quite a few changes to that. And essentially increasing the kinds of paperwork that would be in forms that would shipping forms that would consider changes in interval for reporting reporting requirements. 0.24, the management rule is simply a reporting rule. It does not have anything to do with approving imports or exports. Is simply reporting on after the fact for materials not going, low-level waste not going to the compact waste facility. So we've expanded some of the information there. So this is for your review and start taking a look at it. We will be discussing this at a future meeting. Right now, the status of these draft rules is that they're under review by our counsel, Megan, by Melissa Juarez. And also the NRC, since in the management rule, we have made reference to NRC 10 CFR 110. So they have asked to review the rules. So when those reviews are completed, we'll be coming back to the Compact Commission and asking for consideration for adoption of these rules, these draft rules. So take a look at them. If you have questions or comments, please refer those to either myself or to our executive director, Stephen. We do have some other things on our radar for rules. Commissioner Monday had some suggestions that we're taking seriously considering. Including perhaps allowing some type of an emergency import situation. We're actually gathering data on that from stakeholders and looking to see if this would be a benefit. So we're looking at that as well as possibly adding another section to the rules. So we have some things on our radar and appreciate any comments on that. But right now, the working draft rules that we're working on now that are under review are the ones that are listed that you see in your packet, 0.20, 0.21, and 0.24. Also in your packet, your electronic packet, is something we're calling the technical position paper on assigning who is the generator for radioactive low-level waste coming into our compact waste facility. So this is based on a white paper originally prepared by Commissioner Salzman. And that has been extensively reworked. And again, this is a technical position paper to provide guidance to the Compact Commission itself. If there's ever, the question arises as to who is the generator. We actually saw an example of that today with the Qualtech petition. And it became very clear when Qualtech said that they had actually used these sources for beneficial reasons, for training purposes over a period of 8 to 10 years and stuff. So it made a lot of sense that they were actually the generator of these materials since they no longer are useful to them. And only a generator can determine if it's becomes radioactive waste or not. We don't make that determination. So the technical position paper that you have a draft of in your packet is one to provide guidance to our compact commission. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Chairman Hurley.
And commissioners, an issue has been raised as to whether the technical position paper can exist simply as under its current format as a technical position paper, or it needs to be adopted into rule. And obviously that is a legal question that we would like to seek counsel from our Attorney General representative, Ms. Juarez. So, and this coincides obviously with the fact that it's 12:30 and people may want to run and get a bite to eat. So we are now going to go into executive session to get some legal advice from Ms. Juarez. It is 12:29 p.m. on October 28th. At this time, the commission will go into closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 551.071 to obtain advice from legal counsel for the issues we just described in item 10B of the agenda. The board requests what we will do is we will adjourn to a separate room. We will meet with Ms. Juarez virtually through a separate platform. So you do not need to sign off the Zoom at this point. We will all likely sign off the Zoom and sign on to the different platforms so we can consult with Ms. Juarez. But only board members and Ms. Juarez and our staff will be allowed in that session. Once we are through receiving that legal advice, we'll come back. I would suspect that we probably won't be back until about 1:15. So if that's enough time for you to go eat lunch, I wanted to give you a heads up on that, just so everyone could plan accordingly. And even if we get through before that, we will not reconvene the meeting until 1:15. So if we get through before then, we'll all just take a break. But we will now go into executive session and we will be back at 1:15. Thank you. So commissioners, we'll walk right back here.
Do we take our lap? Do we need to take these?
I think all we need is one.
Okay.
We can hear.
Okay. Fine.
But you probably do turn off your microphones, obviously.
I'm gonna let you do it. Last time we all start this one.
Okay, no problem. Thanks.
Steven, do I need to do anything to this one?
I think we're just going to use Stevens. So I think you can leave that one there.
Perfect.
Melissa, did you get the invite for the other platform?
I did get the link. I was just going to recommend if someone could stay, either, is anyone going to remain in the room just to make sure that the
Here?
whatever's being said isn't being picked up by the Zoom. That's why I'm still on the Zoom, just to see if I can hear anything.
Okay. Megan will stay in here and she'll tell us if you can hear anything.
Perfect. I'll go head over there.
Grab and go.
Guess I better start the recording again, huh?
Everybody's ready.
1, 2, 3. It's very crafted. It's very careful. It's been polished and. We missing anybody?
No, we're all back.
This is Brandon Hurley. We are back. The time is 1:25 PM on October 28th. And the board is now back in open session. No action was taken in closed session. The topic was our consultation with our legal counsel about the issue of whether or not the technical paper should be adopted as a rule. Further consideration is going to be given to that, and action, if any, is going to be taken at a later date. So with that, we can get back to our agenda. And let me make sure, Linda, were you through with your report from the? So with that, we are through item 10, and we can move on to item 11, which is a capacity committee report, and I will turn it over to Commissioner Edwards.
This is Lisa Edwards. I would direct the commissioners to look at the packet where there is a series of slides related to metrics. And I just want to go over a couple of things with you. There are 6 proposed metrics, and I'm going to briefly review them and then move on to where we're at in the process. So these metrics are proposed to be tools that we can utilize when making decisions about whether to approve imports or not. Up to now, we have not had them, and I want to make it clear that they were probably really not necessary prior to this, because there was such a small amount of the capacity utilized or already having waste occupying the space. But as we begin to approach the current constructed capacity is nearing, although not there yet, and may not be there for another year or two, being half filled, that it's appropriate for us to put these metrics in place so that we can utilize them to make our decisions. So briefly, the first one is a comparison of the total capacity related to volume. And there's 3 sort of metrics here. There's what's licensed, what's constructed, and of what is constructed, what is actually already used. So referring earlier to Mr. Carlson's comments, he commented there's 420,000 cubic feet from a volume perspective of capacity available for waste. And of that, I believe he said 220,000 of that 450,000 has waste in it, so it's not available. So the metric would show 450,000 available, total constructed, and then that bar would be split so that you could see how much has actually been used and how much is still available. In the second graph, it's sort of the same concept related to activity, but there's a few more metrics because of the fact that we have decay correction information available to us versus received. And we have a limit of 275,000 curies per year. So there's the licensed activity, that's the blue bar. The total activity that has been disposed, that's not decay corrected. That's what we approved in our processes. That same amount of what's in the ground decay corrected. And then the last 3 little bars are related to the 275,000 curies. How much this year in that 207? Yes.
Is this actual, or is this an attempt to?
These are just pictures to illustrate. There's no actual data. No I should have said that to be clear. What you have in front of you are concepts. It's just a picture to illustrate the concept. There's no actual data. Yeah, that 275,000 cap is real. So the last three metrics under activity on that second chart on the slide titled total capacity is current year, how much have we approved? So that's going to be really an estimate of what was put on the import. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Once it's actually disposed, it's what's actually gone in the ground, not decay corrected. If there is a decay correction available to us before the end of the year, then that would be the second to last bar, current year decay corrected. And then the last bar is what we have approved. So this is the estimate from the import permits, and there's a total, and then what portion of that total is actually approved versus conditionally approved. And that will allow us to see with no conditional approvals, how close are we to the 275,000 mark? And when you add in the conditional approvals, how does that relate to the 275,000 curie cap? All right, the next one, I think the next two slides are duplicates. One for volume, one for activity. This is the most complicated metric and probably the one that is of highest interest to us. Across the bottom, there's a series of purple and blue bars. Purple is actual, blue is projected. So in any given year, we may have only the projected, which would be out years. In prior years, we would know both the projected and the actual. And the reason I think it's important to understand both of those numbers is that our historic data may not include projections, but going forward, it will. And I'd like to be able to compare what was actually disposed against what was projected. There will always be a tendency, if I think I need 10 cubic feet, to say, well, but if the outage goes long or we have this thing happen, I might need 15 cubic feet. And if over time, especially since we have some time because we're less than half filled in the constructed capacity, we'll be able to see over time how the projected volumes compare to the actual disposed volume. And that is for in compact projections and disposal only.
Is your source of information going to be?
So that's a very interesting question, Commissioner Saudik. So there was intention to ask WCS for their projections, and I expect that we will make that request. But Eddie Selig from ARDT spoke with Stephen Rains, and there's conversations ongoing right now. And we have indications that the generators will actually provide the projections to us. If we have projections from both the generators and the disposal site operator, then we'll have to make a determination of how to handle those, because those two numbers may be different. Ultimately, the historical volumes are probably a fairly good predictor of volumes going forward, barring major upgrades, design modifications, or entering decommissioning when a site is currently operating. But I expect to get the numbers from the generators and hopefully from WCS as well.
And this is Brandon again. My position on that is we will hope to get all the information we can to make these estimates as accurate as possible, but at some point, we still have to make an estimate. And
Absolutely.
so if we don't get enough information, we'll have to err on the side of caution, go out and say, what's the most that could be disposed in these coming years? And if we don't have any information to correct us on that, we may have to take an extreme position just to be careful, because obviously we don't want to err on the other side, because then we're in trouble and we don't have enough capacity.
I fully agree with you.
And I believe like the TCEQ has, every 4 years does an update on capacity. I'm sure there's some information we could glean from their reports.
When I think the license is up for renewal in 2024, and I would assume there'll be a fairly accurate accounting at that point with TCEQ, wouldn't there?
I imagine there would be.
Does TCEQ share this stuff with us?
So right now TCEQ, we make requests when we think that they have information. And I don't have any indication that they're unwilling to share it. I am not 100% clear on what is confidential information between the licensee and the licensor. But I think as long as it's public information, they'd be willing to share it. We'd have to ask TCEQ to confirm it. We have been in discussions with them. They are aware of what we are constructing here, and they've been positive, supportive participants.
And the capacity study that they're required to do per their statute is every 4 years. But they are helpful in what processes we're trying to do that is more timely than the 4-year study that they're required to do per the statute.
That's right. Okay, so back to this chart. Across the bottom are the bars that will record historic actuals and then projections going out over time. We'll have a comparison by looking at these bars of how actuals in fact compare to projections for in-compact disposal needs. Across the top is a black line. That's just the constructed capacity. Okay, 450,000 would be the actual number in this case. There are two lines, and this is where it gets interesting. The line that's red that says available constructed disposal capacity. It started in year 0 at 450,000 when there was nothing in the constructed disposal cell. Each year, as that space is actually utilized, the available constructed disposal space will decrease. So if there were 100 cubic feet available in year 0, nothing was in the trench, right? And in year 1, they put 10 cubic feet of waste there, there'd be 90 left. And the first, it'd go from 100 down to 90. And it will continue to decrease. The reason part of the line is solid and part of the line is dotted is the solid line is actual. That's going to go up to the current year. We had this much actual space constructed, and of that space, this much has actually been used. It goes dotted based upon the projections. So if the next year the projected disposal needs are 10 cubic feet, 10 additional cubic feet would be indicated as going to be utilized in that year. And we would do it out for a certain number of years so that we can see the projection over time. While this illustration is a straight line, the actual numbers will certainly not be a straight line. Might be more staircase, some flat in some areas. I don't know. Well, I can't imagine it being flat, but it'll be uneven stair steps, likely going down.
And if you ever build more capacity, there would be a jump.
Oh,
back up.
yes, there would. And this chart is about helping us understand when we think additional capacity needs to be constructed prior to approving additional import permits.
I have a question. Wouldn't you think the person running the place would tell you that?
Well, since we're the commission, I think we have an obligation.
But I mean.
We are asking them for this data.
I will say something controversial. They may have a bias that would motivate them to not be as forthright to us as we would want them to be on this issue, and therefore we need to independently verify it.
I'm shocked.
I'm gonna, I don't want to pass judgment on anyone. There's a chance that projections will be inflated. There's a chance that there's all sorts of different agendas that are out there on all sides of this equation. I think our job as a commission is to gather the data and see what it says to us. And I don't know that we'll have 100% agreement in our interpretation of what the data is telling us. But we'll certainly have more than what we have right now to form a basis and opinion and a lively discussion if it is ever warranted when there are opposing viewpoints. The last line, the blue line, is based upon the actual compact disposal. So, and projected compact disposal. What's important about the red line and the blue line is the red line is what's been used, whether it was in compact or out of compact, because what we're after is how much is left. So there was 450,000 according to Dade, and now there's 220,000. Some of that 220,000 was used by in compact folks, some from out of compact. But in the end, the number that's important right now is there's 220,000. The blue line is what do our in compact members need, right?
Yeah.
So the blue is, as I'm going along, this is how much they've been utilizing. Something just occurred to me. I'm gonna have to do a technical check on my blue line. But the blue line needs to represent from where we are today, what's actually been disposed of versus what our in compact folks need. So as the available capacity goes down and the projection is going up, at some point, those two lines are going to intersect. Okay. And at some point prior to that intersection, we have to decide whether we're comfortable continuing to approve imports. I would suggest when the projection says at least 5 years from now, that the available capacity is only sufficient to meet the in compact needs, then we start asking questions about what's the timeline of building the new capacity. And I think what we need to do is get these metrics in place and use them for a few years before we really make a lot of decisions about what the cutoff point actually is. We need to collect more information on how long it actually takes to construct a new trench. And we need to collect information or make assumptions about how long it takes to be awarded a construction permit. So there's two milestones. One is you have permission to do the construction, and one is you complete the construction. And you can't only rely on, it takes about a year to build a trench or 2 years or whatever. Yeah. Cell, okay. I think that's probably better. The disposal cell. Good. It is, it's not. You're right. I did not mean to use inflammatory language. I certainly don't feel that way about it. Highly engineered disposal cell. Okay. All right. So this slide, I'm going to tell you right now, I didn't recognize it until I was trying to articulate what it was showing here. But the blue line, the solid part of the blue line will be actual disposal.
For both in compact and out of compact.
That's right. Thank you. Yes, for both combined, in compact and out of compact. The dotted portion of the line will only reflect what we have projected for in compact needs.
Let me ask a question because to me, our statutes are not clear on, the statutes say we have to reserve capacity for in-compact requirements. Does that mean over the entire life of these plants, including their decommissioning? And do we apply that total lifetime number, including
There's a chart.
decommissioning?
There'll be a chart that
Okay.
helps with that.
And I was asking, do we compare that against as built right now or license capacity?
I have compared it against license capacity.
Okay. Should we be keeping an eye long-term on the other?
Well, so we just talked about the slide that's titled projected versus available capacity for volume. The next slide is a duplicate of that for licensed activity, which ultimately may prove more informative to us or determinative. Ooh, it's hard to get out of my mouth. The activity may actually end up being more limiting than the volume over time, but we will see. The fact that the license specifically grants the activity based upon decay correction probably removes some of that concern. But we need to make sure we understand the license limits versus if there's a difference between the license limits and what the statute says and which is governing. All right, so per your question, Commissioner Mundy, on the disposal volume allocation, it is the next slide. And it looks sort of like a striped, I don't know, beaker or something. The idea is that the statute specifies a certain amount of volume of the licensed activity.
Okay.
Okay. It is split up between Texas, Vermont, and out of compact. So the bottom portion of the bar, which is supposed to look like it's in blue, is of the licensed, not constructed, of the licensed volume of the disposal cells. There's a certain amount allocated to Texas, and that's in the white part. And the solid part at the bottom in blue is how much of that we have actually utilized. And then the same for Vermont and the same for out of compact. And when you stack them together, it equals the 9 million cubic feet. If we want to look at this on an annual basis, I think it is a little bit problematic because I don't find anything that tells us that there's a certain amount for Texas, Vermont, and out of compact based upon annual usage or based upon construction. It's all just totals. And, you know, there's a thing that we balance here as a commission of, we have an obligation, I think, to ensure that of the constructed capacity, that we maintain a reasonable amount of that that's going to protect the disposal needs of the foreseeable future of our compact members. But if right now we said we need to protect it on just the existing trench, we could in fact stop importing waste, which could result in economic failure of the site, which would mean that our attempts to protect this long-term projection actually killed the waste site. Now no disposal site is available for us long-term. So there's a real balancing act. I think you have to have a projection window that looks far enough forward that it gives time to go through a licensing and construction for new capacity, but it needs to be balanced because we understand that the import of waste from out of state is actually keeping the waste site open and economically viable, and I presume reducing the disposal costs of our compact members. So that's why I compared it to the licensed capacity and not to constructed or annual kind of limits.
The other thing, you know, we've learned doing the contingency planning work. I mean, once Vermont finishes disposal of Vermont Yankee, there is just infinitesimally small amount generated in Vermont beyond that. So I don't know, do we revisit what to do with that excess capacity at that point?
Well, because it's protected by statute, I
Yeah.
think it would be appropriate to revisit it, but we can't just change it
Yeah.
without.
Yeah, that's,
But it'll give us a much fuller set of data on which to go back and have that discussion, because then we know the big need of Vermont has been satisfied. We can measure it, see what's left, and then I think suggest or propose adjustments to ultimately what is the compact between the states.
Yeah.
Because the compact actually calls for that reservation of capacity to Vermont.
right.
And if they say, yeah, we're done and we need, not nearly as much, then maybe that can be adjusted.
And I might add that there is no actual data. These are, there's no data for you to think that's what it actually looks
Just
like.
placeholders.
This is
Yeah.
just placeholders
Yeah.
for you to look at.
No, understood.
Example of what it might be.
These are
Understood.
all just illustrations, no data. Okay. The last one is related to the low activity waste cell utilization. And it does a cumulative disposal volume in cubic feet. Part of that is from in compact and out of compact. The management rule actually requires WCS, the operator, to disclose to us the out of compact disposal volumes. And we will be asking them for the in compact disposal volumes. If there's a resistance there, we'll likely go to the generators and ask if they will provide it. The thing is the low activity waste cell is not actually under our purview. But it becomes of interest to us because when there's concerns about the economic viability of the site, et cetera, considering only the compact cell and not the low activity waste cell gives us a very limited ability to discern the validity of the concerns related to the economic viability. Because if all we know is one small part of the total volumes that are coming in, we can't assign a dollar amount to this. But when the volumes are very high and continuing to increase, which they likely will in decommissioning scenarios, it helps us have a sense, I think, of we're not in trouble from the site not being able to function from an economic bail out the other.
It does the minuscule part, like it's in the whole system.
I don't have the books on that. And I have.
Again, I'm not report what you're doing. I'm just asking.
I'm just really trying to get a more complete picture of the radioactive waste that's coming into our state and going into either the compact facility or the low activity waste facility.
And the other thing I think it does is hearing the suggestions that we've gotten about decommissionings, about the volume and Curie split between how much of a decommissioning is going to go to RECRA versus the compact facility. We're going to have to start doing, I believe, analysis of what's coming up for decommissioning, what should we expect in the way of volumes. And that's going to go into a lot of these estimates about what the future holds. But determining if I've heard it sometimes 85-15 or 50 or 90-10 of, 90% of the volume is going to go to RECRA, 10% of the volume is going to go to the compact waste facility, and then you flip that for radioactivity. We need to determine if those estimates are accurate, because then we can use it again to project out, okay, we know 7 more sites are decommissioning now, so we can project out what we expect to see coming in the way of volumes, because that will also, I think, tell us a lot about how we need to dictate what our ultimate decision is, which is what we allow and import and what we don't.
I agree. I think that ultimately this will lead to a number of recommendations, or at least for us to consider. When we know that a site is going into decommissioning and likely to utilize our disposal site, there's probably some kind of data requests that we should request from the owner operator that is decommissioning the site. They have projected volumes. Every 5 years, I believe, all nuclear power plants have to update their estimates related to the cost of decommissioning to ensure that there are adequate funds being set aside to cover that projected decommissioning cost. Part of the projected decommissioning costs, of course, relates to the disposal of radioactive waste. So there are assumptions that are already available. But when a site actually enters into decommissioning, the pencils get a lot sharper. And it would, I think, we don't have rules in place for this or a mechanism right now. But as we start using these metrics, then I think it's going to start to sort of self-reveal what kind of information we would like to request from decommissioning sites.
Would it be helpful to you and Linda, your committee, for us to start adding conditions onto the authorizations we hand out saying, we're not giving you a permit for the future, but can you give us a future forecast of what your needs will be for our planning purposes?
I think that that's somewhere on the horizon. Right now, it's taken me close to a year to get these metrics together and they're not actually in place yet. So once we get them in place and we start utilizing them, there's going to be questions and challenges perhaps from both WCS and from the generators on, you know, are we getting the data we need? Are we protecting the in-compact people appropriately? Are we protecting the economic viability appropriately? You know, those are things that we should probably work through. My hope is we'll have these metrics available to us starting in 2022, and we can utilize them for a while and then check in and say, how do we need to adjust this?
So you're more tuned into the generators than I am, but I would assume that the generators have done some fairly detailed analyses on what WCS can take and what the sorts of things you're talking about here.
I don't have that information or indication that the generators know how much WCS can take. They might have that information, but I'm not aware of it.
Well, for one thing, I think if you can kind of cross check, if WCS is reluctant to give you what, you know, you feel is a plausible. Well, if they say, for instance, what's it going to cost for them to do a new cell, and they say millions, and then they don't, you know, go beyond that.
I do kind of understand him not.
No, I
It doesn't
understand
matter
it
to
too.
us what it costs.
No,
to
I
build a
understand
disposal
it
site.
too, but I think that you have, my guess would be, Eddie could answer this better than I, but my guess would be that generators have done some projections that may be fairly plausible on this subject.
And that probably has a lot to do with what kind of access to information they have. Because without the information, they may even want to take a guess at it. And I
Yeah.
think that's what we're trying to do, is gather as much information as possible so we can make the most educated guess and do our job. And that's the point of the collection of all this information. Again, as you said, and I think that's the most important point, it's about providing the information to the commissioners and then letting them have their own individual interpretation of, this is where I think we need to start getting concerned or think about not approving imports or asking about the expansion of the capacity.
I think that, I agree. I think that we need to figure out what we need to know, not what we want to know.
Yes, absolutely.
These metrics, in my opinion, are what we need to know to make responsible decisions based upon our positions on this commission, which is, again, in my opinion, a balance between protecting the disposal site for future disposal needs of our in-compact members and protecting the economic viability so that when our in-compact members really most need the site for disposal, it's still there and hasn't shut down because it was not economically viable. So there's lots of things I would like to know. There's probably lots of things I could personally give you conjecture on, but that is all it would be. And it really winds up, I guess I just tried to stay on the side of the line of this is what I think we need to know. There's lots I'd like to know, but I don't actually need to know those things to make a decision. If there's enough room, the site's still open, and I have a big enough picture to say, boy, there's still waste going in, even if it isn't into the compact cell, then I can responsibly as a commissioner look and say, yep, there's enough room for the foreseeable future needs of our in-compact generators, and I can vote to approve an import. If these metrics start telling me that that's not the case, then I would vote to not approve an import. We're a long ways from that, but it's important to get these things in place now so that we have some runtime with them and figure out, oh, that was a great idea, Elise, but you forgot this major thing. It's nowhere in there and it's critical to our decision making. And we may find over time that perhaps knowing the cost of constructing the disposal cell is important for us to know. I don't see that today.
Yeah, I love you to do it, Lisa. I really appreciate you doing it. But from what I've been around nuclear, things change.
Of course
This
they do.
whole thing, I testified before the Senate and the House, both of them. I said, whoever the county judge is, whoever the chairman of this committee and this committee is, you're gonna have WCS forever. It's just, you can't not walk away from it. It's too big. That was early, and then everything started changing, then they couldn't make it, and then they went out to get other states, and then Eddie and, R2, they're trying to deal. And then the big storm last year happened, and both of ours saved us, actually. And some of the electricity being provision. So you have electricity, you have hospitals, you have all this stuff. And then they changed the last one on low level, but then the last couple of years, well, we're gonna start putting more stuff in the low level. And so you have all these changing things that are just happening all the time. It's hard for me to say how that makes, I understand how the metric could operate, I do, but it's just, there's a lot of stuff out there that's happening.
Yeah, I think that we have to respond to the current environment, create the metrics based upon the current environment, but be vigilant if the environment changes in a way.
It's like, they have 245.
No, there are no numbers behind these lines. No numbers.
That's what it is legally. They can only put up to 245.
75.
Yeah, 75. And so right now, that line needs to be 275.
Yeah, on an annual basis, and that is on slide 2.
Yeah.
Or on the first slide, the second graph.
And I will not try to fall into a diatribe here, but to me, this is the very evolution of our commission.
Yeah.
We started with it doesn't really matter, we got so much capacity, we don't have to worry about this. And we are evolving, I think, in a timely fashion to get to we're not anywhere close to it yet, but we need to be prepared for when we get close. And testing out this process is important over the next couple of years to get us to where when it does become an incredibly relevant issue, that we aren't trying to do it as we are also making the decision. And so this is going to give us a runway into that. And I think it's of critical importance. And I do think that I'm sure that, it's just like the contingency plan. It's going to evolve. And I think that's absolutely what we should expect. And to the judge's point, something could change that fundamentally turns all of this on its head. But I also agree with Commissioner Edwards that we know what we know now. We know what we need to know in the way of information to start helping us to understand it and start getting our arms around the idea of how we address this issue when it becomes an issue. And that's all we can do. And, like I said, we are in a position where we can request things and knowing that everyone may have a difference of opinion of what their future needs are. That may be something that we have to sit in somewhat of a judicial function and say, the in-compact generators say we need X, and WCS may come back and say, no, that's not true. They need Y. And then we're going to have to sit here and listen to both of them and make a decision of which one's right. And so I think that is going to be part of our function going forward, which is very different than what we've done in the past. But I do think we have to be prepared to do it.
Or we can let the data talk.
Right.
So if I have 10 years of projections that are 150% of actual, that gives me a way to judge the legitimacy of the projections. If, however, I have 10 years of projections being pretty dead on, fairly accurate compared to what was actually disposed, and the plants come back and say, I need this, then I'm probably going to bank on that. Now, other people may interpret those numbers in a different way, but the point of this graph is to be able to show this is what was projected, this is what was actually used. And we can put both the plants projection and WCS projection and say, you know, same thing. You under projected what was going to be needed. And I factor that into my interpretation of your future projections.
Right.
Okay, so where are we right now? We have these pictures of what the actual metrics might look like. Okay, just to illustrate them. We have the data sheet constructed. And right now we're planning on generally updating this data annually, except for a few pieces of information based upon what's currently happening this year, so we can compare against the cap for the year. Well, with that data sheet, I do not believe has formally gone out to request response, but I expect that to happen soon. Okay, so then we'll put a certain amount of time. There needs to be some branding, make it official, whatever. We need to give a certain amount of time for people to respond. We did try to limit the number of data points to make it as to lessen the burden as much as possible, because it does take time to collect numbers and verify them and all that. We'll start a discussion here next week on collecting the data from the generators. And my hope is that we will have these in front of us early next year. Yeah, it's just the compact generators that we're seeking input from for these, Texas and Vermont. And when I say in compact, I'm talking about our largest generators in compact, the nuclear power plant.
And there'll always be some small portion reserved for the non-generate, the non-power plant generators.
Mhm. So that's where we're at. I'm happy to take any input or feedback on if you think I've missed something or something should be adjusted. For SMRs, small modular reactors. I think that's going to exceed all of our retirement here.
I'm just saying, it's just every day something changes. You know, I told people from New York Times, I said, you know, we have MIT, we have all these smart people. And someday they're going to come dig up WCS and make something out of it. Oh,
Well, there are people who argue that this waste is actually valuable and that someday we'll be wanting to retrieve it. That's a discussion for after the commission meeting.
Well, I will just say
I'm
this.
hungry.
I will just say this to conclude it. This is a phenomenal amount of work, and it's exceeded every expectation I ever had. And it is, I know the effort that you and Linda have put into it, and it's monumental. And so I am incredibly appreciative of it. And I think, I mean, in my non-technical mind, I had a general idea of where I hoped it headed, and this is completely knocked it out of the park. So thank you so much. It's going to be, I mean, we're not anywhere near done. I know that, but the work you've done already is just phenomenal, and we appreciate it. Any other questions?
Good work.
All right, then with that, we can move on to item 12, which is a report from the contingency committee, and I'll turn it over to Commissioner Mundy.
This will be brief, at least by lawyer standards, brief.
Oh, no.
And we, the commission, received a public comment letter It was wide ranging in scope, partly dealing with some contingency plan issues, partly dealing with some rule committee issues, partly dealing with administrative procedural issues. And Commissioner Morris, as she sits on multiple of these committees,
Thank
responded
goodness.
and thanked the person for input. And it highlights the comment that the chair just made a moment ago, which is this, as far as the contingency plan is, it is an ongoing, evolving document. And I know I speak for the other people in the committee, always welcome input. The best way to send it to us is send an email to Stephen and he'll distribute it to us. But sending it in writing allows us to circulate it and start the thought process. The public comment that we did receive, the segments that related to contingency plan are going to cause us to make some very minor revisions. And so before we get way deep into the weeds on that, I would just throw out there, if anybody's thinking about things he would like addressed or think should be addressed, please send us a comment. And I know when we started the process a year or two ago, all of us were surprised at frankly, the lack of input from the public, and just sheer silence was deafening. So, it's out there. It's a reflection of where our mindset is. I'm a big proponent of Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Jeff's rule is, I think Murphy was an optimist. So we try and leave this thing really very wide open to allow discretion to respond to situations that, if we're doing our job, we try and foresee a lot of things. Well, there's always like the COVID scenario that's unforeseen. So we allow maximum flexibility to the extent we can. I mentioned at the last meeting, and Commissioner Morris mentioned, I have drafted a working draft, I'll call it that, of a definition for contingent and exigent events, which she's on the rule committee working with, and a rule to go with that we identified in the process. So I think sometime in the near future, we will see that going out for publication or publishing to the public for comment. So that is on our horizon. It would allow us in what are defined as contingent or exigent events, i.e. emergencies, to meet and react as quickly as we could possibly meet as needed, whether it be for imports, exports, or anything else. We just don't know, but we're trying to work on that. But if y'all have public comments, please send them to Stephen. He'll sift and sort them to either Rules Committee or Contingency Committee. Karen Hadden had earlier asked, are we doing anything now that the high level licensing is moving forward? And so just a couple general comments, and Karen, thank you for it, but I'm gonna use it as a springboard to a little broader comment, which is, first, wearing my lawyer hat, to me, that thing's a long way, years away from actual implementation on the ground. So where we are with the contingency plan is trying to deal with things as they exist right now today. The commission is not involved in commenting on the high level application and licensing process per se. I will tell you, we're not dealing right now with any consideration of what if it's out there, how do we respond to it? But let me just kind of shed some light for people in the public that want to comment on that. Just kind of lay out some broad parameters of who has jurisdiction over what. The high level license falls under the jurisdiction of the NRC. There's an appeal going on from that administrative appeal. At the state level, back when we started the contingency plan work, we had some dialogue with our colleagues at, and I'm gonna use the slang, DSHS, which is the Texas Department of State Health Services, and TCEQ. And just so everybody knows who does what, at least amongst our informal operating umbrellas, is TCEQ oversees and has jurisdiction for the operating license of the facility. So they deal with day-to-day operational issues, deal with things like what if, then they tell us they are, and they are supposed to oversee things like what if there's a fire on the site, if there's a flood on the site, a tornado on the site. That's under the TCEQ umbrella. DSHS, Department of State Health Services, deals with emergency response plans generally on a state level. You know, there's a catastrophic event, a fire, an explosion, train derailment, spills, things like that. That's generally DSHS territory. And in our dialogue with them, we said, well, okay, where are we? What do you want us to do on our contingency plan? They said, okay, we got these other two things. What we don't deal with, we want you to focus on is the business operational aspects of what if something goes wrong with the front gates closed for business for whatever reason. So that's where we focus on how do we deal with the stakeholders who are sending waste streams to this facility. How do we deal with their waste disposal issues? How do we divert them somewhere else? And then what we're looking at, and I will just say it's in very generalized terms, let's say, what if WCS is, the facility is absolutely operational, but there's a catastrophic event at one of the other compact facilities and they shut down abruptly. How do we deal with if Barnwell all of a sudden closes the doors this afternoon because it had a catastrophic event? And that's part of what we're getting at with this contingent exigent event. We may need to deal very rapidly to divert things that might have gone to another compact facility. And all of a sudden we need to say, okay, for public health considerations, they need to go to the Andrews facility. Or, God forbid, what if there's a dirty bomb goes off in a city and there's a mass volume of like personal protective equipment that needs to be disposed of and moved off the emergency site. So those are things we're looking at right now for planning purposes. So that's some just very generalized comments, but I will go back to the point. If you're thinking about something particular, please send it to Stephen. He'll circulate to us. And I expect somewhere in the next few months, we will send a revised, updated draft. I don't envision major changes to what we've already published, but there definitely will be a few minor changes to it.
Any questions of the contingency committee? Thank you very much, Commissioner Mundy.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your work.
You're welcome.
With that, we have concluded item 12. We're on to item 13, which is future meetings. Commissioners, as you can see in your packet, our next meeting is supposed to be December 9th here in Austin. As I always say, we will never meet just for the sake of meeting. Sometimes around the holidays, requests kind of slow down. So if we do not need to have that meeting, we won't, but it is on the books. The meeting after the first meeting of 2022 is February 3rd, again here in Austin. And as I mentioned earlier, because the low-level forum meeting will be in San Antonio, that April 7th meeting, if at all possible, will be in San Antonio, and it may move a day or two either way to work around the low-level forum schedule. We will look into that as soon as possible and get back to everybody so we can all plan accordingly.
That is the Thursday.
And so, so that April 7th is a Thursday, and that is during the forum meeting, I believe. So we may either need to move it to the Friday, or we may need to move it to
Tuesday maybe as well. That was a date that Dan thought might be available as well. But
we'll look into all that. Any questions about future meeting dates? Lisa, I saw that you.
Yeah, so I have a family member that has a medical procedure that has to take place in Houston the week of December 9th.
Okay.
So if we are going to hold that meeting, if there's any possibility we could move it to the following week,
Okay.
it would be.
We will look into that. And again, we appreciate everyone's patience as we work through the hybrid process that we're using. I don't know when that'll start or when that will stop. It may not stop anytime soon, but at some point, I'm assuming we will go back to fully in-person meetings. But as long as that's an option, we will obviously try to make use of it to make our meetings as available as possible to everyone.
We're going back to the cap.
Well, that was going to be my other question. Does anyone have an opinion on that? We're meeting in the Reagan building now. Do people like the Capitol better? Do they like this location?
Is it easier for the IT stuff?
That's a good question, Judge. I don't know. I think we project on Zoom, which is just us, but then we also use the house AV services to also broadcast, and that's what we're doing now when we do that in the Capitol. So I think it works both places, I guess.
It's my understanding that the AV is more up to date here. It's been updated very recently in the Reagan building, so it's probably easier, but I don't know that for certain that it's easier for AV purposes here. in this
And
building.
If
as
our
Commissioner Edwards
executive
pointed out,
director,
you don't have to go through metal detectors
Yeah.
here.
if our executive director replaces the coffee shop by bringing in food or coffee for us,
I will be happy to do that for the next.
I like this building just fine.
I think next year, just long range planning, are we gonna have a meeting in Andrews now that we're doing physics?
And of course, that is always on the agenda, both Andrews and Vermont.
Yeah.
As Judge will tell you, we probably don't want to go to Andrews until we have a little bit warmer weather. So it'll probably be after that April 7th meeting, obviously, and it may, depending on how things work, it could be the one after that. And as we project out our meetings, we'll look into that. Similarly,
Y'all wanted to do that, so.
and similarly, we obviously, if funds allow, we want to go back to Vermont too with our meetings. So we will look at when that makes the most sense. Generally, we have gone in the fall. But I don't know that that's a absolute requirement. We can talk to Dick and Peter and decide what they think is best on that.
Vermont is just what it's worth. Vermont really is a really nice place through the summer also.
Sure.
But you gotta get past mud season, which goes until into April, but after that.
Thank you for sharing.
Might not be a bad idea to beat the heat.
And I might add, we've had in the discussions with the Sunset Review team, they have expressed an interest in visiting the Andrews site themselves as part of their review. We have told them that TCEQ probably should be involved in that discussion as well, since TCEQ plays a very large role in the oversight of the compact waste facility and that entire complex as well. So you might keep that in mind, that the Sunset may be attending as well as and participate in what a meeting we have out at Andrews. as well.
Yeah, so we could kill all the birds with one stone, maybe.
Do you have a deadline you would want to visit out here?
Hmm. We may not make it out there.
That might be a little cold for you, Robert.
Yeah.
actually.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about future meeting dates or locations?
December 9th, I'll probably be on this.
And I assume at this point, we will still have the ability to hold hybrid meetings. And so,
Question I asked.
and of course, we will follow whatever guidance the governor's office gives us on that of if we can continue the hybrid meeting and what the law allows. So, any other questions about meetings?
And if y'all want to move the December 9th meeting to another date, we can have a further dialogue on
Yeah,
that. About
sure.
moving that. That's not set in
Absolutely.
stone. That's just what's put on the sheet here.
Absolutely. Hearing no others, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all very much.